Hi guys, I'm Vedant Tiwari and I'm from second year SY BLS, Advocate Bada Saheb Apte College of Law, Mumbai. And it's a great pleasure to speak before you guys, and we are truly honored to speaking here. And the thing which I wanted you all to know that this Army Moot Checkmate was our first national moot in which we ever participated, and by God's grace, we won that. So it was truly a big achievement for all of us. So thank you for inviting us. Looking forward to talk with you guys.
Hi, I am Isham Karanjikar. So first off, again, thank you for having us here. It's actually an honor. We feel very cool about it. so about an introduction, I am also from Advocate Bahasaheb Apte College of Law, and yeah, I have a general interest in how constitutional or criminal law works. And like Vedant put it forward, this was the first moot that we did, and winning it was a very it was an amazing experience. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone that is present here in this room right.
That's great to hear. Uh, so, regarding your mood, it would be great if you could just tell us a little more about the area of law that you guys prepared on, how you prepared, and what was the entire journey in a brief manner. If like all of you could contribute to that.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll just start off and then you guys can add on to whatever I'm.
Sure.
So I think as far as the area of law goes, it was a matter of criminal law. So the case was, if I may just quickly explain the proposition, because it was a very interesting proposition. I mean, the first time we actually read the proposition, it was already there in our mind that yes, we have to go for this because it is such an interesting case. So the case was, there was this guy. His name is Peter. He had a wife, Alexa, and Alexa they had other friends also, Rajesh and his wife and so on. But Alexa had a bad marriage with Peter in a way, and one fine morning she was found dead, hanging from the ceiling by their friend Rajesh. And so the entire case was around the fact as to basically if Peter can be charged with 302, and whether the charges that he was charged with, whether he can be charged with those charges. But the most fundamental and the most interesting part of it, what I felt, was the electronic evidence that was there. So there is an Alexa device also. So there was an Alexa device that was in the room, and that device would record a conversation every time someone said Alexa. So whether that evidence can be admitted in court. Now, this was our case. So it was basically related to the Evidence Act. Then there was an element of narco analysis also, wherein Rajesh, the person who found the woman dead in her apartment, whether he should be subjected to a narco analysis or not. And the third aspect was obviously related to the Indian Penal Code as to whether the charges that accused was charged with are right or not. So that being the case, it involved sort of a very good reading about how basically criminal law works, the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Penal Code, the Evidence Act. So a lot of reading went on into that. I think as far as the journey of this moot, to put it, it was more like, uh, we had a very base of our research that we had done, that was done for the eliminations that took place in our college. So the MCS of our college, the Moot Court Society, is actually, it's fantastic. So the way they work is, so when a proposition comes out, we are told to register for it, and then there are eliminations held to determine as to what team is to go for. So 3 people are selected. And I think at that time we had done a foundation research as to how we're supposed to deal with this. But I mean, obviously, a lot of thought went on to it later once we three came together. But to talk about the specific field of law, it was, yeah, these three aspects of.
Just a follow-up question to you before we move on to the other speakers. I would like to ask, were you all acquainted that the problem is going to be based on criminal law only, or did you guys get to know about that once the problem was released and the challenges was on some other problem?
I mean, obviously, after we read the proposition, uh, eh, after that, like after a lot of reading that went into the proposition. So, like to understand like what the case is exactly based around, I think we read the proposition a lot of times. There was a lot of reading that went into the proposition. I mean, even after we were selected as a team after the college eliminations, we read the proposition a lot of times. So prior to that, no, we did not have an idea if it was a criminal law matter or not, because like Vedant said earlier, this was our first mood, and it was the proposition that actually, after reading it, that gave it away.
Okay, okay. So,
Out
coming to Vedant, what was the time period that you three as a team got for the preparation of this moot?
Yeah, sure. So like we got into this mood in the month of September 25th or 24th. And that time point, we know that we were a team. And after that, for almost we got 2.5 months for preparations. Till the video round, we had to prepare a video and send it to the organizers. And that was the preliminary round. And once our video was selected, we were into the quarterfinals. So on and on, like we got 2.5 to 3 months to prepare.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Arjun, can you acquaint our readers, our viewers, with the difficulty level of the mood proposition and how you guys went through it?
So to begin with, I would like to say that you'll only find out how difficult a mood proposition is by reading it over and over again. Because every time you read it, you will find a new aspect that you have to tackle. And like Isham said, that it also involved constitutional law, criminal law, and also involved Information and Technology Act because of the Alexa part. So how to incorporate all these three factors and form an argument was our challenge. So the mood, the proposition was actually very clear, but our arguments had to be very creative in order to make the judges understand that we have understood the proposition very well. So how we went about it was just reading the proposition once by ourselves and then reading it together, then making note of what is important in the proposition and what we need to tackle. And each aspect was different. And since we were given the contentions, we also made a bifurcation of sort of what we need to tackle within each contention. And how we did that was basically by again reading the proposition, then doing some follow-up research, then reading the acts together, understanding the acts, seeing which section pertains to which problem, and that's how we went about it. And also, we also saw how we need to frame each argument. Like at every step, we saw how we need to frame each argument, and that's how, yeah, we went about it.
So, Asian, if you could tell our viewers about how you divided your work amongst yourselves, and like for a reference, if you divided per issue, or if you divided the work amongst per, all of you work together in all the issues so that there is a variety of opinions. So, how did you go about it?
That's a very good question, actually. Three of us had asked this question to each other right before we began researching. I think what we did was initially like to understand what is there in the proposition. So, like stated earlier, we read the proposition several times. So then there were 5 issues that were listed in the proposition. So the first thing that came to our mind is that we had to identify which are the like what acts, what laws do we exactly have to study, and what goes on into like what is the application of that law? Why has that law been made, first of all? So, like I said, the first 2 issues of this moot were related to the Evidence Act and with respect to the admissibility of electronic evidence. The third issue was related to a narco-analysis test, and the last 2 issues were related to the Indian Penal Code as to the charges that the accused was charged. The first thing we did is that all of us we started figuring things out about what is an electronic evidence. So the way we did that is we had to firstly figure out as to how an Alexa device fundamentally works, right? So we did that. So we dealt with the first two. I mean, it wasn't an exact bifurcation that we made because all three of us ended up working on all of the issues in different ways. Because because I remember when we had started, Vedant was doing the first two issues. While I was also reading up upon the narco analysis and the IPC, and Arjun was dealing with the first two issues also. So the thing was that we had to identify which issue basically requires a lot of research, and that only happened once we like sort of rotated these blocks that we had found, like Evidence Act, IPC, narco analysis. So then these we just kept on rotating it amongst ourselves, and then we found a lot of good points. I think then I Indian Penal Code. So one of our issues was whether uh, the accused can be charged with 302 under the IPC, that is murder. So we had found out that there are certain cases wherein you just cannot charge somebody like that if there is no minimum evidence. Like there has to be some minimum evidence that has to be presented before the court, uh, so that you can add a charge in that particular case if it is not already there in the charge sheet. Uh, and then when this issue again went on to Vedant, when he was researching on it, he found out a beautiful theory called the last scene theory. And I don't think anybody, like in all the three rounds that we argued before the opponents, nobody had brought up that point of the last scene theory. So it was like, it was in rotation. Like everybody was researching on everything, but I wouldn't exactly say that it was very methodical or structured. It was like a discussion basically. Like every time we're reading up on something, we were meeting that day and we're discussing it through the night. This is what I have read. This is what I have read. So then a lot of opinions came up, and then we would look into those opinions. Like this is one particular argument that can be made. So where does it stem from? How does it come here? And so on. I mean, they can add on to this obviously.
Yes, definitely. Like to continue what Isham just said, like once we were done with our research, we had the material in our hand. Then we came to a point like how do we distribute the issues amongst ourselves, and what issues is to be dealt with first and what issues should be dealt with at last and at the later stage. So what we found out that this propulsion was set up very tricky in a very tricky way. So there were five issues. So the fourth issue was dependent on the fifth issue. So we took a strategy to deal with the fifth issue first. So it will be easier for us to deal with the fourth issue. So this is how we devised a strategy to like which issue should be deal with the first. Like the first two issues were purely technical. It was about the admissibility of electronic evidence and all. So it is you need a proper textual knowledge to deal with that technical stuff. And the other last two issues were specifically related to IPC, and there were some practicalities into it. So like we discussed amongst ourselves that what aspect are we more comfortable to deal with. So then we thought that yes, let Isham deal with the first two issues, and I will deal with the other two issues. So this is how we distributed the issues amongst ourselves. But we did this step at a very later part of our preparation. Like first, we didn't distributed the issues amongst ourselves. That okay, you take this issue and research upon this and do the argument. So we didn't do that. So we researched collectively, and later at the later part, we decided to distribute.
One thing I would like to add is something that we did, which is very important, was discuss. After everything we researched, or every day, we used to come and discuss and get all our ideas together. So we know what stage we are at and what level of information do we have. And that discussion really helped us get our opinions and form our arguments. So the discussion that happened at the end of the day, where we all researched and then we like got our ideas together, was very important for us in knowing how to proceed, how to go about it, what more needs to be researched, and basically forming our whole arguments together.
So I think we're all a little acquainted with how you drafted your memo. I would like to ask Vedant again about how did you guys, go for the oral rounds? Like, did you contact any seniors of yours? Do you have a culture for that in your college, or did you like, approach other people from other colleges? And how did you practice as a team as well? And after that, I have, I think, one or two hands raised. So I'll just pass on the questions for those. All right.
Sure, definitely. So like just when we got selected and we all realized that this is the first national moot we are participating in, so we needed some mentorship, and luckily the mooting culture in our college is like very good. Our seniors were very helpful. We got mentorship from two of our seniors who participated in the earlier edition of this same competition, Checkmate 2019 or 2018, I guess. So we got mentorship from them. So they helped us a lot to guide us through the uh, way, like how should we take on the issue, how should we understand the proposition. So they guided us through that process, and then we took it on ourselves to continue with the research and all, and we kept on updating them with the research which we have got. So they just check it like, yeah, you guys go ahead. So we got the go ahead and we continued. So yeah, we got the mentorship from our seniors. They were very helpful. So this is how we speaking of oral rounds, that aspect was very very interesting, since this happened totally through this virtual medium. So we were not standing in the court before the judges, and so it was a very unique experience, because to qualify to the quarters we had to make preliminary round videos, and that was something very new for all of us. So we were asked to make 15 minutes video for both the sides and send it to the organizers. So we did that, we qualified, and then we got to the quarterfinals, and the medium was same. Oral rounds were happening through this Zoom video conferencing platform. So this is how we go on with the oral rounds.
Okay. So, Arjun, can you also tell us briefly about the quality of judging there? Like, how were the judges? Were they qualified enough? Were they briefed enough?
So I would like to say the panel that Mohali Army Institute chose was very good, especially for the semi-finals and the finals. I think the judges were more than qualified, and the questions that they asked really got us thinking. And the questions that they asked were connected to our arguments. So the level of observation and the attention that the judges were paying was also amazing. Also, the judges asked us relevant questions, and the judges also asked us questions that are actually like in line with our arguments. So I think the bench that was in the final round was also very good, and it was very challenging also, as Vedant and Isham will tell you more about it, that the bench was um, of some senior advocates and judges as well. So it was quite challenging as well.
So it was a three-judge bench. So one of the judges were the former DGP of Haryana, and one of the judges was sitting judge of Punjab and Haryana High Court, and one of the judge was the senior advocate. So it was a very esteemed panel.
Okay, okay. So, I have a question here. I'll just read that. How did you manage classes and moot court preparations simultaneously? Isham, if you could answer that.
Yeah, I mean, the classes were actually the classes were online. So we attended the classes, and I mean, our college has a very flexible timetable, if I may put it that way. So we have our lectures in the morning. So that morning slot, once we're done from 7:30 to 9, or from 9:30 to 11:30, whatever. So once we're done with that slot, we have an entire day and the entire night that is left. And all three of us, we have different working times also. So Vedant works in the evening, late night-ish, sometimes in the morning. Arjun works throughout the day, and I work in the night. So then we had, that way it was like all of us at one point of time, one of us was always working on this. So uh, so yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't actually a very big deal to manage between the classes and the moot courts, because we're just in second year now, so there's not a lot of pressure for studies, and with everything being online, it was easier to focus on the moot court, if I may put it that way.
So I totally understand because I have participated myself in both virtual as well as physical competitions. But having said that, I would like to know all three of you's opinion as to how did you manage a virtual moot? Because as we know that when I did a physical moot, it's pretty easy to just sit together and discuss, and it's not that easy to discuss, on over a video call or over a phone call. So, how did you discuss all these important issues and how did you pull up a virtual moot?
So
Oh,
we used Google Meet to meet. We used to meet every day
Yeah.
using this platform called Google Meet. And we also used to talk using various platforms. We used to be connected on WhatsApp. We used to talk to each other on call, and we used to talk to each other on Google Meet. So one thing we made sure is that we'll keep talking to each other, so the link shouldn't break. So we made it a point to talk at least once, if not twice in a day, so that everybody knows what's going on. And also to add on how we manage with the virtual mood in the arguments round, so we actually practiced it among ourselves. So one interesting, very interesting thing we did was we um, like the speakers used to speak to the other two contestants as if we were the judges. So that's how we practiced for the competition, and we got acquainted to it slowly, slowly. So we practiced quite a bit for it to get acquainted to it.
Yeah. Actually, to add on to what Arjun just said, so I think the biggest thing that is like the most important thing that would come to your mind when you're thinking about virtual circumstances where we can't meet anymore is that your communication is that, and that communication has to be so strong at all times, because if it was physical, then we knew that we can just go to a library, we can sit together and all three of us know what is happening at that time. The research will also be done so much faster. But on the virtual, I think what we made sure was that everybody was firstly comfortable with each other. So then, like, if I have a doubt in the middle of the night, I can either text or call somebody, and I know that they'll answer, and then we can work it out either the next day morning or whatever. So that comfortable factor was there, I think. And also when Arjun, on a funnier note, actually, so when he said that, so what we would do is that the one speaker, when we were done with our arguments, we would argue in front of so when Vedant was done, he would argue before me and Arjun. And at that point of time, it was like, so the process that we did is that you make arguments and you see if your arguments are fitting within a certain time limit. And then we would grill each other. So, and that was actually very funny because we never kept a time limit. So you grill the speaker until you're satisfied with the answer that he is giving you. And it was merciless at all times.
It
I
was
think
hard
that
to
is,
judge bench.
yes,
So
it was
I'll tell
very,
you something very interesting. Like just before we got selected in for this mood, we all three barely knew each other. Like we didn't even talk throughout the first or second day because there was no communication amongst ourselves. So, but now we are at that stage of comfort level. Like we can talk, we can say anything without any filter in our mind. So we are at that comfort level. So whenever there's any sort of disagreement, or there is no political correctness into that. No, I guess you should think like that. No, we are straightforward, and that actually helps us a lot to get a better understanding of the issue which we are dealing with. So yeah, though there are some drawbacks of this virtual medium, we were not able to hang out. There was no, the better part of participating in the moot court competition, but we
Mm.
managed to, it actually saved a lot of time of ours because we are in our home 24/7. So we could meet anytime we want, like in just few minutes, we are talking to each other. Uh, yeah, so there were some advantages and disadvantages too.
That's great to hear. I am getting a lot of questions as to how did you prepare for oral rounds in a virtual setup, considering that research is something that we can do with our college resources and everything of the sort. How did you prepare for your oral rounds? If you could, shed some light on that, any of you.
right. So what the way we had gone about it, it is a very unconventional way to go about it actually. So we had actually started when we were researching, we were already sort of making our arguments at that particular time, you know. So if say if I find something very pertinent to our case in the Evidence Act, I will add it and then I will show that how it applies to our case, what precedents are there, so on. So it was so then all of our research that we had, we were already making it in the form of arguments. And then we just incorporated those in our memorial, and the memorial submission was done. So we still had a couple of days left till the quarterfinal oral round started. So in that period of time, we found out that the memorial and these arguments that we have, they've been, I mean, obviously they are very suitable for a memorial at that particular point of time. But what we needed is we needed to find something that if I may put it, something unique, you know. And that was like, and we were in a constant search of finding something unique, because I remember since we talked to our seniors also, so our seniors stressed on this particular point that your arguments are effective when you have something different to say. If you're saying the exact same thing as the other teams are saying, then there is no difference between you and the other team. So I remember, I think, like I stated earlier also, so our entire process of making the oral arguments was that you have to explain it to the judges like you're explaining a 2-year-old kid. So if you can explain it to a 2-year-old kid, that means you have really understood what you're talking about. So we went about it like that. So we structured our arguments very well. So first thing that we did, pertaining to the first two issues that I dealt with. So it was about the admissibility, firstly, of electronic evidence. Secondly, whether stolen evidence can be admitted before the court. So then I went about it in a very structured manner. Firstly, it was like I explained what an Alexa device is. How does an Alexa device work? And if it falls within this category of electronic evidence, then what are the circumstances under which electronic evidence is to be submitted before the court? So there's this section 65B of the Evidence Act. So there is a particular subsection to it, that is a subsection 4, that says that if you have to submit or admit an electronic evidence before the court, then you need to have a certificate for it. If you don't have this certificate, then it cannot be admitted before the court. So this certificate, what the certificate does is basically if the evidence is authentic and so on and so forth. So we went into this procedure that yes, this is an electronic evidence. It satisfies the definition under the IT Act. Then can it be admitted in court? Yes. But it is also a stolen evidence, right? So can a stolen evidence be admitted before the court? So then we went through, I think, there was this one particular law report that we looked into that was by Justice K.K. Matthew. So it was a law commission report. So in that they had stated, they had actually suggested some amendments that should be made to the criminal procedure code. And we studied those, and then they said that you can admit a stolen evidence if it does not violate any of these 4 prongs. So a lot of that went. So it was very, very neatly structured, if I may put it that way. So because that is what is very important about, like from what we learned from this moot and the moots that we did after this, is that when you're arguing your oral rounds, it is very important that you structured it well. And I remember when it came to the quarterfinal rounds that we did, I think I had finished my arguments in 10 minutes, because one thing that we did that was very important is that every issue that we began, before beginning that issue, we had a summary. This is what I am going to speak about now. These are my contentions. This means this. And then we started it. And after we were done with that part of the arguments, we summarized it at the end also. So this is what I have said now. And this is what we are praying for. And then so on. So it was in a very structured manner that way.
And also because we had access to technology since we were like meeting virtually anyways, we figured that small things are very important. Like the amount of time you take to explain the brief facts of the case also is very important in an argument. And so we had to work on these small things and get them, like, make it concise. So I remember when Isham was working on his brief facts, we first took 2.5 to 3 minutes to say the facts, but eventually when we reached the oral rounds, he mastered it in 1.5 minutes. So that's how it happened only with practice and then editing and then again speaking it in a certain way so that it takes less time but also doesn't miss out any important detail. So that's how we went about it.
So, Vedant, I'm getting a question that did you read all the relevant cases or that are relevant or not relevant on the databases, or considering the time was at paucity, did you just refer to other sources to read a summary or brief or something like that?
Yes, so that is actually a very good question. I actually read it in the chat box. So I would like to make few things very clear to all the participants here. Like, we did not had the access of SEC or Manu Patra for this competition. So we had to research in a very unconventional way. So what we did, that we read many commentaries of IPC, we read the commentaries of Evidence Act and the Information Technology Act. We got to know about the case laws from those commentaries. We looked up about those case laws from the official website of Supreme Court and the summaries of it. We read the relevant sections of that judgment. So like, we know the judgment tends to go like 500 to 1000 words. So what we did, like, we filtered out the relevant paragraphs to our case. We read those paragraphs and tried to put it in our arguments. Now, I would just like to mention one very important thing which we realized after this moot, that our every opponent in all three rounds, they heavily relied on the case laws. Like after every sentence, they were citing a case law. After every two sentences, they're citing some another judgment of some another judge. So what that results in, you know what? Like we need to understand one thing, one concept of attention span. Attention span in this digital medium is very less. Like it's like there was some research. It's even less than a goldfish's attention span. So what we decided before we even started to talk about the oral rounds, we decided to make our case very interesting. We read one very good book, Learning the Law by William Glanville, I guess. I don't remember the name quite so well. In that book, there was a very interesting point that a good lawyer is someone who makes an argument and then support it with the help of some judgment or a case law, not the vice versa. Like I find the case law and try to, make my arguments according to the case laws I find. No, what we did, our approach was first we made our arguments, and then we thought, yes, we should support this particular argument of ours with some case laws. If we don't find some case laws, not a problem. We'll try to convince judges without the case laws. So if you would have saw our arguments, like we seldom relied on case laws while arguing. There were the case laws in our memorials, but we just cited in one or two sentences before the judges, because the judges already know what are the case laws are, what the law is. They want to know our perspective. What do we think about the case? So this is how we managed to take the situation in our advantage. Like since we did not have the huge resources like SSC and Manupatra, we decided to go ahead with whatever the material we have and justify it and make justice to it and argue. So this is the strategy we took for the oral rounds.
We used a lot of Indian Kanun. I can say that.
To actually add on to
Yeah.
what Vedant said, this is where I think the organizers were very, very cool, because up till until the time that we were told that we have qualified, we had absolutely no access to SCC or Manupatra or anything. So we were like, it was Indian Kanun. But after we qualified to the quarterfinals, the organizers had given us a 1 month access to SCC. And I think that was very, very cool, because at that point of time we were like, yes, now we can not only verify if what we have is right, but also like add on to, like, we can substantiate on a particular argument at this point of time. So yeah, I think that was very cool of the organizers.
So I take that the moot was really well organized, and
Yes.
Definitely.
that's actually a very good thing, that if a moot is well organized, the participants also feel, energized and encouraged that they're also serious about it, since a particular team is putting so much effort. So I am getting a question that how many cases did you quote? I think you've already answered that quite well. And I have another question, that while starting an argument as respondent, is it good to point out some mistakes made by the opposite team? If any of you could answer.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
I
Yeah.
I'll take this, and then you guys can answer, because
Sure.
we had deliberated on this one particular thing for days and days and days as to, should we say this? Is this good to bring up? So, and I think the best time we actually played the role of the defendant was, I think, in the finals only. Other two rounds we were prosecution throughout. So when we were defendants, the one thing that we did was we pointed out everything that was there in their memorial, but there wasn't much to talk about at that point of time. Because to be honest, since we were already prosecution for the first two rounds, when we got their memorial was the exact same as our prosecution memorial. So the arguments and everything, so they were spot on, the finalists in the final round. And it was like, basically it was arguing in front of a mirror, sort of, because these are the arguments that we have made also in the previous rounds. So what we talked about was, there was one big lacuna that was there in the proposition that nobody talked about, is that there was no mention of whether a panchanama was made, whether a station diary was maintained, was it submitted to the judge, what all every necessary document that is required to make an electronic evidence admissible in court. none of these documents were actually made a mention of in the proposition. And after talking to all of our seniors, so they said that once you identify these things in the proposition, that these things are not mentioned, you can use them to your advantage. There is no shame in that. So we use these things actually. So when we were arguing, so we said, your lordship, is there a panchanama that has been presented before the court? Is there a station diary that talks about this particular evidence? Is there any record of this evidence even being there at the crime scene? So there was no record. So then how can you push for the admission of this particular evidence? Something that is not even there in your books. It is not recorded. So it is a very good thing actually to like sort of rebut in your arguments itself. You point it out. You say that this is what the prosecution is contended, and this is entirely wrong. This is what it actually is. And I think one of the best parts was, again, coming back to a point of research, is that your research never really stops throughout the entire movie. You're always researching, you're always finding new things. So one particular section that we found was section 131 of the Indian Evidence Act. And that particular section talked about, so say I have a particular piece of electronic evidence with me, but that electronic evidence actually belongs to Vedant. So if that evidence was in Vedant's possession, and if he does not consent to it being admitted in court, then that evidence cannot be admitted in court at all. And this was like how can I put this? This was like a nail in the coffin of everything that the proposition had said in both of their first two issues. So it is a very good thing to do. And it is fun also to do it, like when you're arguing. So you know that the prosecution has said this, and you know that this is a direct rebut that I have in my argument. So to point it out, I think it's like brownie points, maybe, that you get extra points. You've done well.
And what helped us also was that after we finalized our prosecution arguments, we took some time to think about how we can rebuttal our own arguments, forget the other respondents' arguments. So that's how also we formed a little bit of a defense argument. So I think if you do that, it's like you have your own strong arguments which you need to think counters to. So that's also what helped us get through the whole process.
You know what? Since the question was addressed to the respondents, like how did we prepare as our strategy for the respondents, I would mention a very big fundamental mistake which all our opponents did throughout the competition, is that when you are participating in a criminal law and you are the accused, a very basic fundamental thing is that you don't make any claims from your side. There is this concept of burden of proof. So the burden of proof is always on the prosecution. The moment you as an accused make any claim, like, no, I was not there, no, what are the other possibilities and all, instantly the burden of proof shifts to you. So we got this concept very clear, and we were lucky to have this concept very clear to ourselves, because most of our opponents made this mistake when they were in the defense. Like they continuously made some of the other claims for the accused itself. So the burden of proof is on them. Now prove it. So you're not there, prove it. So we decided to keep ourselves away from this, and we specifically said that how we are not guilty, how I don't have any involvement in this crime. Forget about the other aspects of it. So yeah, this is our strategy for the response.
Very well said, Vedant. As they say, choose your battles well. So you
Yeah.
chose them, and I think that is the reason that you stood out of all your opponents. I think that we will be, ending this session in some while. So just about to answer, just if you could answer a little, some of the questions more. Um, just a second, there are a lot of questions actually, and like most of them have been answered by you through your speeches. So I don't want to repeat them for the sake of brevity. So I'll just give me 2 minutes. I'll just skim through all these questions. So this has been answered. So there's a question: how do they prepare issues for memorial? Like what all aspects they focus upon while framing issues? So I think Pratiksha has asked this. So in their case, the issues were given to them, I
Yeah,
believe.
we
So
had
if
the
you
issues.
guys, if you guys could explain her as to how did you, frame the sub issues, or how did you characterize, structure your entire memorial. So I think that would help her.
So one
Right.
strategy, yes. Okay, so the one
No,
strategy
Vedant,
which we thought, yes, sure. So the one
Hindi.
strategy which we thought while dealing with the issues is that we always saw the issues from the point of view of the organizers. Like, what did organizer expects from us with that particular issue in hand? So, just by reading the issue, we get to know whether the organizer want the technical aspect of it, whether they want to test our knowledge on that particular issue. So, like, one of the simple issue was whether you should subject this particular man to the narco analysis or not. So what we, got from that issue that organizers wants to know our knowledge on narco analysis. So we decided to frame our issue in such a way that we'll first tell the judges like what the narco analysis is and what is our stance, whether they should be subjected or not. So we firstly summarize our issue like in 2-3 paragraphs, which summarize it very quickly for the judges, and then once they know that what we are going to argue, they take a back seat and just listen to us. So this is how we dealt with most of the issues. First the issue, we summarize it for the judge in the memorial, and then we go on to expand it slowly and slowly.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
that was, yeah, the best thing that he actually did was, I mean, in forming your sub issues when the issues are given, or even while forming the issues when they're not given, the basic thing that you have to look at is how well have you understood the law. Because I mean, even before we got in, so when we were researching, we had absolutely no idea that these are supposed to be the sub issues at that particular point of time. So taking the same narco analysis
Sorry
example.
to interrupt you. Is Arjun not in the meeting right now?
I am in the meeting. I'm just not
Okay,
visible
he is
because
in the
I'm
meeting.
not
So
All
able to
right,
turn
all
the camera.
right. Can you do it now?
Yeah, I can do it now.
All right. There must be some technical issue. Ashun, continue, please.
So yeah, taking the same narco analysis example. So the first thing that we did is we found out everything about narco analysis, and then we realized that yes, so there was two people. There was Peter and there was Rajesh. So Peter was the accused, and Peter had given his consent to a narco analysis. So taking a look at the precedents and all these guidelines for all these tests that are there, can he be subjected to it? Yes, he has given his consent. So provided that all the regulations and everything is in place, sure, you can subject him to it. But Rajesh, on the other hand, had not consented to it. So why should he be subjected to it? So he cannot. And I think this is another fundamental point that is very crucial to be understood in criminal law, as far as it goes, is that as defendant, there is no harm in accepting certain things, right? So as defendants, when we were to argue about whether the accused is to undergo an narco analysis, we just looked at basic guidelines. So has he consented to it? Yes, he has consented to it. Was there an officer in presence? Yes. So the clarification said that there was an officer present and everything. So all the legal formalities have been abided by. So the accused can be subjected to an narco analysis. But in our contention, so how we were going about it is, so we were basically creating a doubt in the mind of the judges that, so you have to, in criminal law, obviously, you have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt that the accused is the person over here who's committed the crime. So we just had to create that reasonable doubt, and there was no harm as defendants in admitting that no, Rajesh has not consented. So why should he be subjected to it? So yeah, I think that's how we went about it. A lot of research, I mean, a lot of things happened, and towards the very end of this particular, like the final leg of this particular move is when we decided that this is how we're going to divide our issues and sub issues. That is, and yeah, that is how we do it. Our research.
So basically, we followed the principle of dispute the undisputed. So if a particular fact is undisputed, our job was only to dispute it. It
Correct.
is not as clear as it is seemed to be. Our job is to just create a doubt for the judges, because ultimately if you are convicting me, you have to be convicting me for convicting me. The reasons should be beyond the reasonable doubt. So that is what we took it as a strategy.
All right. I just have a question for Arjun. So, if you believe that a particular argument is weak from a particular side, how do you draft it, and how do you deal with it? How do you research about it? Like,
So
if you could.
if you believe that an argument is weak, first thing is you have to do is be clear about what the facts of the argument you need to include in it. And one more thing you should know is that you should not try to overcomplicate it by adding some things that are not going to put any value to it. So when you think an argument is weak, first you have to know what the facts are, then what law is related to those facts. So once you know that, you have to just draft it as simply as possible. So it's like you're telling a story, and the more you complicate it, the more confused you will get, the more confused judges will get, and then in the end the more questions they will ask you about it, which you won't be able to answer because the argument doesn't allow it. You cannot go beyond the purview of a certain law just to make an argument strong, and you cannot add facts that are not included in the proposition just to make an argument stronger. So you just have to go with the flow how the argument is. But one thing is important, that you need to research a lot about it, and you need to be sure that the argument is, you need to be sure that it's precise what you're drafting is precise.
So,
That's how you
Arjun,
tackle a weak argument.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Can you do you believe that you should add sociological or emotional perspectives to an argument just because it's weak and you do not have any legal standpoint on it? So, what's your take?
See, in the end, it's a legal argument. So if the proposition doesn't pertain to any sociological or um, like what you said aspect, then I think you should avoid adding it. And you should also see where you're arguing it. So in the Supreme Court, it's not more on the facts based, but it's more on the law base. Argue upon facts, and you can also argue upon like how this fact is affecting a particular person in relation with each fact that's given. So yeah, in a way you can go very deep into it.
So like that
Very
question
good.
talked about a weak argument. There is no such thing as weak argument. If you think that your argument is weak, probably your research is a bit lacking in that area. Because, and if suppose we decide that there is a weak argument, invoke the factor of silent facts in your proposition. There are many aspects which are unclear from the view of the proposition itself. So just use that in your stride and make your weak argument strong. So this can be one of the strategy to do that.
Assumption is also
Assumption.
very
Yeah.
important, but it has to be factual assumption. It cannot be a random assumption that's not connected to
I think adding on to what Vedant and Arjun said, so as far as the emotional element or the sociological element
and
goes
connected
on in the
directly.
arguments, if if now let's take the issue that we had, is the electronic evidence was stolen from the accused, and now the person who has stolen it has signed some deal with the prosecution and has said that you don't charge me for breaking inside the house and so on, and then I will help you decode whatever is there in this particular evidence. So I mean, at no point should you rely on emotional or sociological aspects in that issue, because it is a legal matter. So you bring out law to support it. But in law, there are always certain sociological aspects that are always considered. So when you talk about those sociological aspects, you get into the constitutionality of things. So first basic thing that we did is why that evidence cannot be made admissible is because he also has a right to privacy. He has an Article 21 with him. So if you just keep breaching that particular right to obtain that evidence and then produce it before the court, then there is no point to the whole justice as a whole. And we made a mention of this point. In fact, there are four principles that we had found out that go into the admissibility of electronic evidence. So as far as a sociological aspect goes, yes, you can add it provided that you have principles that are set principles accepted by the Supreme Court, uh, that you can talk about in those aspects. But as far as making your case or strengthening your argument with emotions, not very advisable, because we're in court. So yeah, that would be it.
But for forming the arguments, we took another strategy for forming a basic argument. And what we did, that while writing the arguments, we thought of hearing that those arguments from the point of view of a judge. What will the judge think about it when I make these arguments? So this gave us this approach gave us an perspective to understand what will the judge think about it. So that is how we formed our arguments, so that it should be viable for the judge to think about it and consider it. So we took a third party approach, like whenever we are writing, what would the judge say?
Okay, so I have a final question for all three of you. If you all could give one or two tips each for our viewers here today, in general, it could be related to the mood that you have participated or for mooting in general. Starting with Asham, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So I think I mean, in general, actually. So if you're mooting or so, I think the most fundamental aspect is research. So I mean, oral rounds and all, everything, it is important. It determines whether you qualify to the next round, whether you win the moot or not. But everything is based on the research that you have. So say your proposition, now this can apply to any proposition. So say you have a proposition that has mention of certain laws or certain cases that are stated in the proposition. So the first thing that you need to do is, after you've read the proposition, you know that this is the case, you look into the laws that have been mentioned in the proposition. So every single law that is there in the proposition, every act you read the commentaries, you read every case law that is pertinent to that particular section. You identify parts of that statute that are very relevant to your case. And this is obviously once you've understood the proposition. Whenever there are case laws that are given in a proposition, you read that case law and you go to the very depth of that argument. Where does this particular argument stem from? So then you read that case law. That case law has cited other case laws to support that particular argument that you want to make. Then you get to the bottom of everything. So the first step, as such, would be that you research, you read a lot, and secondly, and this is very important, is that you identify what parts of the proposition are really relevant to you and what parts of the proposition are not relevant to you. So sometimes what I mean we saw in a lot of the opponents, I mean the opponents that we face in the quarterfinals actually, is that they were talking about facts that are not relevant to our case at all. So sometimes what happens is that you're making certain arguments, and just to strengthen that argument, you're adding that this is a particular fact that has been mentioned in the proposition, or that this is a doctrine that talks about this particular fact. But is it really relevant to your case? So I think that would be very important. Is that identification of what you exactly need, and that all comes on from research. So research is the base to everything.
All right, thank you.
Very well. Like, very briefly, I'll just say two aspect. That firstly, think out of the box. Whenever you get the proposition, think out of the box. Take the road not taken, and don't just satisfy yourself with the status quo, because there are 32 other teams who are going to say the same thing which you are going to say, and the judge is going to hear the same thing which all the 32 teams are going to say. So just think out of the box. What extraordinary argument you can make, which can form an impression in the judge's mind. And other thing, very important, convince yourself with the arguments which you are making in the court. If you are yourself not convinced with the argument you are making, the judge is never going to get convinced. So this is two tips which I would like to share.
I think Vedant and Isham said this very well, but I would like to add on to it is that you have to begin with reading. And it all starts with reading the proposition. Reading the proposition, it gives you a head start to what your research will be. And once you read the proposition again and again and again, you will know where to read it straightly, and then where to read between the lines. So I think reading is very important. And then that reading also
refers to reading your research. When we participated in another mood, like which was an environmental law and constitutional mood, we realized that out of reading this 100-page research, 5 lines were important for our case. And to get those 5 lines, we had to read those 100 pages. So I think in the end, it all amounts to reading. And also, one more thing that's very important according to me is teamwork and discussion. When you discuss with your teammates, you open up a whole array of ideas that you may not have, or that are like that's an idea which you are developing together. So that's something you'll only get by discussing. That's something you'll only get by sharing whatever you think, even if it's not relevant. We can find something relevant by sharing something that's irrelevant. That's what we have done many times. And small things matter a lot. So attention to detail, how your memorial is, how your memorial looks. We have realized how your memorial looks is very important. It should be presentable, it should be clear, it should be very, and it should be very like, easy to understand. Once it's easy to understand, then the judges who are reading your memorial and judging your memorial will actually feel like reading it. Now there are certain competitions where first they judge your memorial, then they pass you out, like you can go on to the other round. So I think that's very important for um, competitions like that. So I think these small factors that we summed up together make a strong team, and which help you go ahead in the rounds.
I think we have reached the end of the session. I personally feel that it was a very fruitful session. I really liked the company of you three for an evening like this. And just to like summarize whatever we have learned today as viewers, I personally feel that brevity is the weapon of the wit. Everything that you say in a moot court competition should be simple. Everything that you say in a moot court competition should be comprehensible. It should not be, you should not use legal jargons just to sound intelligent. And then research, as was pointed out, is very very important. There is no shortcut to hard work, so just work hard and try to read as much as possible. And only when you read what is not relevant, you know when something is relevant.